The eviction notice felt like ice in her hands. Sarah stared at the stark, official letters, and a single, bitter thought echoed in her mind. This was her reward. This was what she got for being kind. It was all because she'd bought a lonely old man a can of soup and a loaf of bread just hours before. Let's go back. It had been a long day. The kind of day where your feet ache deep in your bones and your smile feels like a cheap mask you can't wait to take off. Sarah, a single mom and a waitress at a greasy spoon diner, had just finished a double shift. Her tips were light and her mind was heavy, preoccupied with two things: the rent that was due tomorrow and the sound of her 7-year-old daughter Lily's cough, which seemed to be getting worse. All she needed was milk for Lily and maybe something cheap for her own dinner. She was standing in the checkout line at the corner grocery store, counting the crumpled dollar bills in her hand, when the commotion started. Ahead of her, an old man was fumbling with his wallet. He was thin, with a coat that had seen better decades, and hands that trembled slightly as he pulled out an old, worn-out card. He was buying so little, just a can of chicken soup, a small loaf of bread, and a single, slightly bruised apple. It couldn't have been more than a few dollars. The cashier, a young woman with impatient eyes, sighed loudly. "It's declined," she said, her voice flat and bored. The old man's shoulders slumped. "Oh, I'm sorry. Could you try it again, please?" "Sir, it's not going to work," the cashier snapped. The man behind her huffed. Someone else shuffled their feet. The air grew thick with annoyance and secondhand shame. The old man looked at his small pile of food. His eyes, watery and pale blue, held a profound sadness. It was the look of someone who had been invisible for a very, very long time. Something inside Sarah broke. She saw her own father in his slumped shoulders. She saw the quiet desperation she felt every single day reflected in his eyes. She thought of Lily, sick at home, and the fear that clawed at her own heart. In that moment, his hunger felt like her hunger. His shame felt like her shame. Before she could think it through, she stepped forward. "I've got it," she said, her voice coming out stronger than she felt. I have it." The cashier looked at her, surprised. The old man turned, his eyes wide. "Oh, no, miss, I couldn't possibly." "It's nothing," Sarah insisted, already pulling out the $20 bill she had set aside for the rent. It was a stupid, reckless thing to do. That $20 was the difference between having a roof over their heads and not. But looking at his face, she couldn't stop herself. "Please, let me..." She handed the money to the cashier, who snatched it without a word. The old man just stood there, looking at her as if she'd hung the moon. "Thank you," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a little wooden bird, carved by hand, smooth and simple. "My wife, she used to make these," he said, pressing it into Sarah's palm. "It's not much, but thank you." His hand was cold, but the wood felt warm. Sarah just nodded, unable to speak, a lump forming in her throat. She paid for her milk, her own dinner forgotten, and hurried out of the store before the tears could fall. All the way home, regret gnawed at her. What had she done? That was their safety net, gone for a can of soup. When she walked into her small, cramped apartment, the first thing she saw was the envelope taped to the door. The eviction notice. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, wasn't a cruel man, but he was a businessman. She was 2 weeks late. He'd given her until tomorrow morning to pay in full, or they were out. The $20 she had just given away wouldn't have saved them, not entirely, but it was a start. It was hope. And she had just handed it away. That night was the longest of her life. Lily coughed in her sleep, a dry, rattling sound that tore at her heart. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the eviction notice on one side, the little wooden bird on the other. She felt like a fool, a naive, foolish woman who put a stranger's dignity before her own child's security. The injustice of it all burned. She worked so hard, she tried so hard, and for what? To be one act of kindness away from homelessness? What would you have done in her shoes? Would you have walked away, or would you have paid for his food? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm curious to see what all of you would do. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a knot of dread in her stomach. She had no plan, no one to call. Her parents were gone, and her friends were all struggling just as much as she was. She got Lily ready for school, her hands trembling as she packed her lunch. "Mommy, are you okay?" Lily asked, her big brown eyes full of concern. She forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a little tired." As she walked Lily to the bus stop, she decided she would go to the diner, beg her boss for an advance, and then plead with her landlord for just one more week. It was a long shot, a desperate prayer. She was halfway through her morning shift, her mind a million miles away, when a man in an expensive-looking suit walked into the diner. He didn't look like our usual clientele. He bypassed the counter and walked straight towards her. Sarah's heart plummeted. It had to be someone from the landlord's office, here to humiliate her at work. "Are you Sarah?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. "Yes," she whispered, her hand starting to shake as she clutched a coffee pot. "My name is David Chen," he said, handing her a business card. "I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of my client, Mr. Arthur Vance." Sarah stared at the name. It didn't mean anything to her. "I'm sorry, I don't know any Arthur Vance." David Chen smiled gently. "I believe you met him last night, at the grocery store." Sarah's mind reeled. The old man. His name was Arthur. Why did he have a lawyer? Was he suing her? Was he angry that she had embarrassed him? Her world, already tilting, began to spin out of control. "He was deeply moved by your gesture," the lawyer continued, his voice soft. "He tried to find you last night, but you'd already left. He only knew you worked at this diner because of the logo on your uniform shirt." Sarah was speechless. Moved? But it was just a can of soup. "To you, maybe," David said. "To him, it was everything. You see, Mr. Vance, he hasn't had an easy time these last few years. His wife, Eleanor, passed away 2 years ago. He's been lost. He felt invisible. Yesterday, you were the first person to truly see him in a very, very long time." The story was starting to come together, but it still didn't make any sense. Why send a lawyer? The lawyer leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Sarah, Mr. Vance is not just any old man. Before he retired, he was Dr. Arthur Vance." Sarah just stared blankly. David took a deep breath, as if preparing for the most important part. "Sarah, he was one of the world's leading pediatric pulmonologists. He specialized in rare and difficult-to-treat respiratory illnesses in children." The coffee pot slipped from her hands and crashed onto the floor, shattering into 100 pieces, but she didn't hear it. The only sound she could hear was the frantic beating of her own heart. The only thing she could think about was Lily's cough. The doctor's words from last month came rushing back. "It's a rare form of bronchial inflammation. We're monitoring it, but the specialists for this are few and far between and very expensive." If you're feeling the tension and the hope building right now, do me a favor and hit that like button. Let's send all our positive energy to Sarah and Lily.
"Your daughter," David said softly, seeing the look on her face. "Mr. Vance overheard you on the phone at the store. You were talking to a friend about your daughter, Lily, about her cough, about how worried you were." Sarah's legs gave out and she sank into a nearby booth, her head in her hands. It was all too much. It was impossible. "Dr. Vance wants to help," David said, sitting opposite her. "He has a foundation, the Eleanor Vance Foundation, set up in his wife's memory to help children with these kinds of illnesses. But since she died, he lost his spirit. He didn't have the heart to run it. He said your kindness yesterday reminded him of his wife. It woke him up." The lawyer slid a check across the table. It was made out to her landlord for the full amount of her back rent plus the next 6 months. This is just to take care of the immediate pressure, David explained. Dr. Vance has already been in contact with your daughter's pediatrician. He wants to personally oversee her case. He has booked an appointment for Lily this afternoon with the top diagnostic team in the state. All expenses will be covered by the foundation. All of them. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but they weren't tears of fear or despair. They were tears of overwhelming, unbelievable relief. Hours later, Sarah found herself not in her cramped apartment, but in a bright, clean, state-of-the-art hospital wing. Lily was giggling as a kind nurse showed her a cartoon on an iPad, and walking towards her down the hall was Arthur Vance. He wasn't the frail, defeated man from the grocery store. He stood taller, his eyes were clear and full of purpose. He wore a crisp doctor's coat over a simple sweater. He looked alive. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Dr. Vance, Arthur, I don't know what to say," she stammered, clutching her purse strap. He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. "You don't have to say anything. You already did everything you needed to do last night." He looked over at Lily, and his expression softened. "My Eleanor, she always said that a single act of kindness is like a stone thrown into a pond. You never know how far the ripples will go." He reached into his pocket. "You reminded me of that. You paid for my food when I felt worthless. You gave me back a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. Now, let me help you with your little girl." Sarah opened her hand. Still resting in her palm was the small, carved wooden bird. It was a simple, humble thing, a piece of wood, but to her, it was now the most valuable thing she had ever owned. It was a symbol of everything. That can of soup and loaf of bread didn't lead to an eviction. It led to a miracle. It was a ripple that had come back not just to save her home, but to save her daughter's future. It was the unimaginable, beautiful, full-circle moment that proved that sometimes the very best of humanity shows up when you least expect it, in the checkout line of a corner grocery store. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of kindness, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You never know when the next story will be the one that changes your perspective or maybe even your day. Thanks for watching.